We get more now from John Garcia.
By late afternoon, law enforcement officials were bringing in reinforcements from the military and from area police department SWAT units. More than 100 officers to surround the complex with heavy firepower. From a former member of the cult whose parents remain inside, this plea to cult leader Vernon Howell.
Look around them and realize what they're up against. Lay down your arms and come out and put an end to this before it gets any worse.
Even as officials attempted to negotiate with cult members by telephone, ATF agents mourned the loss of 4 of their own. 14 others were wounded, some seriously. It was difficult to accept, even for seasoned law enforcement professionals.
Our hearts go out to these brave agents who died today in the line of duty, and to their families. Today's events point up to the fact that federal law enforcement officers across America place their lives on the line every minute.
Newspaper reporter Mark McFerrer was on hand to cover the raid as agents tried to serve warrants at the compound about 9:30 this morning. When the gunfire started, he also became a target.
I mean, the shots were that close. I mean, flying over our heads, and it shook us up.
The agents had a search warrant and were trying to arrest Vernon Howell, leader of that cult.
Federal agents were definitely at a disadvantage. You know, they jumped out of the trucks and, you know, did the best they could, but then they had to take cover.
Now, just a short time ago, a second gun battle erupted at the compound. No word on any casualties. At least 75 people remain inside that building.
Today, the heavily armed religious cult. A shootout earlier today left 4 agents with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms dead. As John Garcia reports, authorities say it is the agency's single bloodiest day.
By late afternoon, law enforcement officials were bringing in reinforcements from the military and from area police department SWAT units. More than 100 officers to surround the complex with heavy firepower. From a former member of the cult whose parents remain inside, this plea to cult leader Vernon Howell.
Look around them and realize what they're up against. Lay down your arms and come out and put an end to this before it gets any worse.
Even as officials attempted to negotiate with cult members by telephone, ATF agents mourned the loss of 4 of their own. 14 others were wounded, some seriously. It was difficult to accept, even for seasoned law enforcement professionals.
Our hearts go out to these brave agents who died today in the line of duty, and to their families. Today's events point up to the fact that federal law enforcement officers across America place their lives on the line every minute.
Newspaper reporter Mark McFerrer was on hand to cover the raid as agents tried to serve warrants at the compound about 9:30 this morning. When the gunfire started, he also became a target.
I mean, the shots were that close. I mean, flying over our heads, and it shook us up. It shook me up. I'm still shaking.
This isn't the first time there has been trouble at the compound, which houses the Branch Davidians cult. But this time, officials seem determined to bring it to an end.
The man is definitely a danger to the people in the compound and to himself.
Cult leader Vernon Howell claims to have more than 75 members inside the compound. He says they are heavily armed, and at this point it appears to have become a battle of wills. Reporting near Waco, John Garcia for NBC News.
And as we told you, law enforcement agencies remain camped out at the scene. We will let you know if there are any developments in this story on our 24-hour news source. The FBI confirmed today that a bomb caused the blast at the World Trade Center, but speculation on possible culprits ranges from militants from the former Yugoslavia to foreign drug dealers. Some good news: a Port Authority worker who was missing and feared dead was found alive and unaware that he was even considered missing. But tonight, still one other worker is not accounted for.
With their young children gathered for a vigil in remembrance of James Bulger. Bulger is the 2-year-old boy who was murdered earlier this month. James disappeared from a shopping center on February 12th. His body was discovered on railway lines 2 days later. His funeral is scheduled for tomorrow.
The power the blast had is clearly evident. Outside the World Trade Center complex, sidewalks are buckled. Glass is still all over the ground.
This morning, some of our chemists from FBI headquarters had access to the site. They then conferred with police department explosives experts, and the consensus was that beyond a reasonable doubt, this was a bomb that caused this devastation.
The fact that the FBI has announced the explosion was indeed a bomb is no surprise. The tough work will be figuring out who is responsible for it. New York police say they have now received dozens of calls from people claiming responsibility.
The first call received some publicity, and it did relate to the Serbian-Bosnian situation, but we're not necessarily putting more credence in that call than any of the other calls.
New York's mayor says even though it's impossible at this point to determine a motive for the explosion, for security reasons, the city has to operate as if it were a terrorist bomb.
You have to make the assumption that may be the problem, and you can't await a determination, and there are increased measures being taken even now.
Those increased measures include tighter security for airports, buildings, and certain people. All evidence that no matter what the reason for the explosion, nobody wants to be blamed for taking unnecessary chances. Gary Tuckman, CNN, New York.
On 77 acres east of Waco, Texas, Sunday morning when federal agents tried to serve an arrest warrant on the group's leader, 33-year-old Vernon Howell, for gun control violations, a fierce gun battle broke out. In a telephone interview with CNN, Howell, who calls himself David Koresh, said federal agents began shooting first.
They fired on us first, but like I say, they were scared. You see, the rumors that are going around, like I say, they were scared.
Reporter John McLemore was there.
Where we were standing, we were having, bullets were ricocheting right off around us. Hitting, a couple of feet away from your own feet. And then a couple of the agents went down, and I could hear one of the groups that were kind of pinned down behind this one group. They yelled at us. They said, hey, television, cameraman, get an ambulance.
When the shooting stopped, ambulances were brought in to take out the dead and wounded agents. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms officials say the 4 agents killed in the gunfight is the largest single loss the agency has ever had.
From the course of events and our limited review so far, it appears that they knew we were coming.
Negotiations have continued by phone for hours. In the meantime, federal, state, and local authorities have set up a perimeter around the compound and are getting prepared for what may be an attempt to storm the compound if that becomes the only alternative. Federal agents say everything is currently at a standstill. Negotiations are continuing, and they're bringing in additional personnel. But for now, they say, there is no deadline for bringing this situation to an end. Tony Clark, CNN, Waco, Texas.
1985.
Somehow the shooting started. Was it intense?
They started firing at me. And so what happened was that I fell back in the door, and the bullets started coming through the door. And so then what happened was some of the young men and stuff started firing on them. And I was already hollering. I was saying, hey, go away. I was hollering, go away. There's women and children here. Let's talk.
This evening, 3 SEC members came out shooting, and authorities shot back, killing one, wounding another, and taking the third into custody. Return to CNN World Report shortly, but first a news update. Now it's a waiting game and a test of
members of a well-armed religious cult. 4 agents are among the dead. And Eye on America. Tonight, it could be the...
And NBC's Jim Cummins is there tonight. Jim, what's the latest?
Tom, so far today we have not heard any gunfire, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms says it plans to continue negotiating nonstop by telephone with Branch Davidian, the heavily armed religious cult inside the compound, in an attempt to peacefully end this standoff. There is no way to know how many people live in the compound, how much firepower they have, or if they intend to use it. But ATF agents learned the hard way. They are dealing with an irrational, hostile force that murdered 4 agents in a hail of gunfire. Today, an ATF spokesperson made a stunning admission when asked what went wrong in one of the biggest and most planned operations in the history of the Bureau.
I don't believe is that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned. They had bigger firearms than we had.
There's a madman living in Waco.
David Koresh, a musician who believes he's Jesus Christ, was the main target of the raid Sunday. He's the cult leader. The cult claims to be an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists, which have renounced Koresh and his followers. Many people who know him or are former members of his sect say Koresh, whose real name is Vernon Howell, is dangerous. David Slauson left the sect 10 years ago.
Vernon is insane. Vernon should have been locked up a long time ago.
And this from Laverne, California, the home of many former members of Koresh's cult, including an ex-wife who's afraid to show her face and a cop who tries to protect her.
Before I left, Vernon had a hit list, and it was people who had left the group.
There's some people who live here that were ex-members, and they're scared to death.
And in a bizarre twist, Koresh offered to release 2 children from the compound every time this radio station read one of his religious messages. The latest pair, numbers 7 and 8, were released late this afternoon. It's the same radio station Koresh has telephoned twice to complain about his gunshot wounds.
David, sounds like your leg is in pretty crummy shape.
Well, I've been hit through. Watch out. Okay. Oh, I've been hit through the stomach, and I think it broke my pelvic bone and went out my back.
The radio station also reached Koresh's mother in East Texas.
I just want to say, if Vernon's listening, I love you.
There are late reports this afternoon that as many as 6 children were released from the compound, and a man claiming to be inside the compound called a local television station within the past hour saying that all the women and children would be released after dark tonight, Tom.
2 was wounded by the gunfire.
Watch out. Okay. Oh, I've been hit through the stomach, and I think it broke my pelvic bone and went out my back.
Koresh took control of the group, the Branch Davidians, in the late 80s. The group began in 1934 in California. Its generally peaceful members believed in the imminent end of the world and the second coming of Christ. When Koresh took over, the group became his personal cult, as shown in this Australian TV interview last year.
Well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the son of God.
Do they?
Yeah.
And they became violent. In 1987, a struggle for leadership at the Waco compound turned to gunfire. Koresh, who changed his name from Vernon Howell, was charged with attempted murder along with 7 of his followers. They were not convicted, but former members were already warning the Davidians could be very dangerous.
Because Vernon have got the people primed to a stage where they will defend him with their lives.
But questions are arising about why they were outgunned in the first place. Critics are asking, how could a federal agency plan for months for this kind of armed assault and have it turn into such a disaster? Tom Foreman, ABC News, Waco, Texas.
Are holed up after a bloody Sunday morning shootout. CBS News correspondent Vicki Mabry is at the scene of the standoff near Waco, Texas.
In the cold and rain of the Texas countryside, the standoff continues as federal negotiators attempt to talk cult leaders out of their fortified compound. So far, the only progress has been the release of 4 children this afternoon and a half-dozen others last night. They left the 77-acre fortress and were handed over safely to federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents. But the children were inside the compound early Sunday morning when deadly gunfire broke out as 30 federal agents, backed by state and local law enforcement officers, tried to serve warrants on the group's leader. For 45 minutes, federal agents were pinned down, battling automatic weapons fire with handguns. With a ceasefire negotiated, agents went in to recover their wounded and their dead. The toll? 4 federal agents killed, more than a dozen injured. 2 members of the cult dead as well.
I don't believe it's that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned.
Agents were after Vernon Howell, also known as David Koresh, the charismatic leader of the 75-member Branch Davidian cult. Howell, who claims he is Christ and admits to being a polygamist, foreshadowed a potentially deadly confrontation in an interview with Australian TV 6 months ago.
They come in here with a gun, and they start shooting at us. What would you do? Tell me. Be realistic. This is America.
6 years ago, Howell engaged in a bloody shootout with the cult's former leader. The case ended in a mistrial. Now, Howell's father and grandmother are begging him to surrender.
If he done something wrong, he should pay for it. But I can't see him getting killed. I'd like for him to give up.
If he ever done anything in his life, I want him to give up because they're going to kill him.
Even though police have brought in reinforcements, they're hoping there will be no more bloodshed. There is fear tonight that with the release of additional children, the cult leaders may be trying to force a confrontation, saying to federal agents, You wanted us? Come get us. Dan?
Vicki Mabry, live in Elk, Texas. Thank you. Stay here with us now for more CBS News, including
on tape and to be presented to the public. But on second thought, I thought it might.
Tense negotiations continued throughout the night as federal lawmen coaxed a steady flow of children off the Branch Davidian compound. At least 10 kids have been freed, traded for messages from cult leader David Koresh played on the radio.
People that are ignorant of where we're coming from. And
every time Koresh hears a message on the radio, he releases more children that are now holed up with 75 cult followers surrounded by the police. The standoff began Sunday morning when more than 100 federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents raided the Branch Davidian compounds looking to arrest Koresh. The heavily armed cult was waiting for feds, and a 45-minute gun battle ensued. 4 agents are dead and more than a dozen wounded. 2 members of the cult died, one of them reportedly Koresh's daughter. Koresh himself told radio reporters he's wounded.
I've been shot. You've been shot, and you are bleeding.
I'm bleeding bad.
Today, ATF countered criticism that they botched the raid.
The main problem we had, I don't believe, is that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned.
The FBI sent its elite hostage rescue team to the scene today, and an armored personnel carrier has been on the scene since before nightfall yesterday. So far, the success of negotiating some of the children out of harm's way would seem to indicate that there's a lot of patience left in the law enforcement arsenal. And after all, time is on their side. Brian Karam, Fox News, Waco.
And an added note for you this evening, we were going to have a live report from Brian, but shortly before we went on the air tonight, all the press was asked to move away from the road, from the compound, and the Associated Press reports now that the federal marshals and military are moving in, and should the situation change, before we go off the air, we'll update you.
President Clinton has declared New York City an economic injury.
From Keystone Country's premier broadcast news organization, this is Action News.
Hello, it's the Action News Night Beat for Monday, March 1st. I'm Caroline Sarnoff.
And I'm David Venable. Craig is off tonight. Some of the youngest casualties in a Texas shootout are set free.
And you'll hear this.
Presumably heavily armed combat troops. Up ahead, a heavily armed fortress of fanatics who answer only to their own laws.
Classic case of mind control. They don't have enough rest, they don't have proper nutrition, and he just keeps them going all the time.
See, he said to his members recently that if anything happens to him, to kill his enemies. So if he dies, then that's why I'm worried.
His ex-wife, who now lives in California, she says that he is both vindictive and crazy. That we've heard of, there has been no mass removal of women and children from the cult compound tonight. That was rumored. In fact, it was leaked by someone in the cult compound to local radio and television outlets. For now, in the dead of night, what we have is a stalemate with heavily armed forces on both sides. That's the latest in Waco. I'm Mark Strassman reporting live. And now let's go back to you.
Leader of the Branch Davidians, a heavily armed religious cult which split off from the Seventh-day Adventists almost 60 years ago. But his kingdom began crumbling down yesterday when federal agents stormed the cult's compound outside of Waco, Texas, in order to arrest Koresh on possession of illegal weapons. Since yesterday, a bloody standoff has left 6 people dead, including 4 agents and a 2-year-old child, and as many as 15 injured. Today, the deadlock continues. The cult leader has been in constant contact with TV and radio stations.
Who died? 2-year-old baby, my girl. I have a lot of children. I have a lot of wives.
What was her name?
I'm not going to disclose that at the present time.
He was born Vernon Howell, an illegitimate child. He went as far as 9th grade and later changed his name to David Koresh, a name he says God gave him. In 1985, Koresh became the leader of the Branch Davidians, preaching the 7 seals from the book of Revelations. It describes a series of cataclysmic events that culminates in the end of the world. Koresh told his faithful he would then guide them safely to heaven. In 1987, he engaged in a gun battle over a split in the cult with a rival member. Charges against Koresh for attempted murder were dismissed after a mistrial.
We didn't want to hurt anybody. No, I've owned a BB gun once in my life, maybe twice. You see? You play none of the guys in this group have ever been invested for anything.
He's been called the sinful Messiah. Some have accused him of child abuse and having sex with underage girls in the cult. He has at least 15 so-called wives, marrying one legally when she was just 14 years old.
I'm a polygamist. One person has delivered 7 of his kids, and this person has been out of the cult for a couple of years now, so... And that's just the ones that this person delivered.
Another ex-wife describes her former husband's powers.
He basically kicked me out of the house, and then I, just said, this is enough, and I left. And then a month later, my brother came to see me and told me that he heard of child sacrifice.
It'll be another Jonestown.
Many former members, including Mark Briault and his wife Elizabeth, have fled to Australia.
I left because what Vernon was doing with little girls, sexually molesting them, I couldn't agree with that.
Briault asserts that the children are being deprived of basic human rights.
He's supposed to repopulate the world with righteous children, so young girls are prepped from a very early age to look forward to having sex with this man.
David Jewell clashed with the cult when Koresh tried to bring his 11-year-old daughter into the cult.
My daughter has told me that on one occasion he did paddle her.
Jewell's ex-wife Sherry is one of Howell's many wives. A judge ruled Jewell's daughter, who now lives with her father, was never to be near Koresh again.
The information that we have is that at that time she was slated to become one of his wives.
Speaking by telephone from his compound to radio station KRLD, Koresh said he would release the children 2 by 2 if the station read his theology.
We've been playing your message on the radio. I think we played it about 5 or 6 times so far, which would mean that about a dozen kids should be out of there.
And we want you to play it as often as you can.
During that interview, Koresh, who had been shot through the stomach, described his pain.
Are you getting weak? Are you getting tired?
I'm getting pretty weak.
Are you the most seriously wounded of the people?
So far.
With me right now is Mark Bunz, a self-described former cult member who says that his sister actually bore David Koresh's child and that his father is actually a high-ranking official in the cult and perhaps trapped in the compound even as we speak. Mark, first of all, have you talked to your dad? Are you scared for your dad right now?
Well, I attempted to contact him about 1.5 years ago, but this man we also know as Vernon wouldn't allow it. We made attempts to contact my sister Robin Bunz and my stepmother. Found out that they are away and quite safe, but even they don't know the whereabouts of our father.
When you see what's happening here, 250, 300 combined lawmen from all different kinds of agencies, there's been gunfire, gunplay. How frightening is this for you?
It's tremendously frightening. It's been a shock to everybody's system involved, I'm sure, and I'm just trying to focus my attention on discovering the whereabouts of my father.
What is your biggest fear at this moment, Mark?
The biggest fear is that Vernon is going to press these people into service, can cause the law enforcement agency to come in and enforce again and perhaps fight it out to the very last member.
This Vernon Howell or David Koresh, how dangerous is he?
It's pretty obvious he's dangerous enough to have caused the death of several lawmen and members of his own group and wounded many others.
Quickly, Mark, are his followers in that compound prepared to die for him in the cause?
They are quite prepared to die.
You're certain of that?
I'm certain.
Mark Bunz, thank you very much. Bill, that's the story from here, just outside of Waco. Let's go back to the studio.
Thanks, Scott, for that report. And coming next, as Inside Edition continues, we'll have team coverage of that terrible...
David and Peggy, as you said, there really was a lot of hope about 9-10 hours ago here that this would all end and that it would end peacefully. That was not to be. And right now, there's still a lot of tension in the air as this standoff, this confrontation, goes on.
As night settled in, more military vehicles surrounded the Branch Davidian compound as the bloody ordeal dragged on, well past an agreement to end the standoff peacefully. Night scope video revealed an eerie but calm scene at the complex. There was little, if any, movement.
I'm sure you're all aware of how I'm involved in a very serious thing right now.
Tuesday afternoon, 33-year-old cult leader David Koresh broadcast a 58-minute rambling scriptural monologue, carried at FBI request by Texas radio stations and a national Christian network.
I, David Koresh, agree upon the broadcasting of this tape to come out peacefully with all the people immediately.
EMS units were rushed to the site and hospitals told to stand by to treat the wounded.
The two that come to your mind first are blood loss and infection. And infection is usually what, if an untreated wound in 48 hours is going to be infected.
Police and federal agents stood guard tensely at a Waco hospital as evidence of their jumpiness. At one point, they hustled away a man who continually circled the complex in his pickup. He was held briefly on suspicion that he might be a Davidian. A Houston newspaper, meanwhile, reported that at least 11 and possibly 19 cult members may be dead inside the Mount Carmel complex. The Associated Press said up to 40 cult members who were wounded in a Sunday firefight with ATF agents may be among the holdouts. Before the surrender agreement was broadcast, another group of women and children was set free, bringing to 18 the number of kids released since the siege began. But Child Protection Service officials are saying as many as 20 more children could still be inside. Peggy and David, as we say, the situation continues. The Associated Press is reporting tonight that it has been told also that at least 10 additional bodies are still inside the Mount Carmel complex. But nobody can confirm that until all of this ends and the agents can move in to see exactly what has happened. Back to you.
All right, thanks very much. Charles Ziwi reporting live from Waco.
Forecast from Channel 11 and the Carnegie Science Center. Every day you're not going to see sun.
The winners, but it took a while.
Further bloodshed in this incident.
Among those waiting for word on the dead and injured are Bruce and Lisa Gent, who flew in last night from Australia. Two of their children are cult members.
The kids could be lying dead on a slab in the morgue, who knows?
This is the first time since the standoff began that no one has been released from the compound. Negotiations continue, however. Federal agents say they are ready for a long wait because they have absolutely no plans to storm the compound. Dan?
Vicki Mabry near Waco, Texas, thanks. 4 federal agents died in the Sunday morning shootout there in Texas. 16 others were wounded. One of the bloodiest days ever for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's a bureau filled with brave people. It has a distinguished record, but its leadership is now forced to respond to questions about their timing and tactics and the decision to engage in the raid at all. Correspondent Scott Pelley has our report on that.
The assault on the Branch Davidians was an elaborately planned raid in which federal agents expected to catch everyone unarmed. But it became a firefight when the Davidians were tipped off. A federal source close to the investigation has explained to CBS News the detailed plans for the raid and what went wrong.
So how's God going to talk to me in the latter days?
Agents working undercover infiltrated the cult, attending services for more than a month. They found each day after the service the men, women, and children separated to different locations. Only Koresh was allowed to be intimate with the women, and only Koresh had the key to the gun room with all of the weapons inside. Sunday, the undercover agents went to the morning service and left as usual. They told the assault teams all was normal. No weapons were out, the gun room was locked, and the men, women, and children were segregated. The raid began 25 minutes later. One team hit the second-floor gun room, another team was assigned to secure the women and children, and a third was assigned to the men. But the first agents in found that the men were armed and ready. 3 agents who went through the gun room window were killed. Another died leaving his car. Koresh has told federal agents he received a telephone tip before the raid. Now a federal review board will investigate. One question, why assault a building with so many children? Many in law enforcement question that strategy.
If there are children inside, you must then presume and you must designate it as a hostage situation because children do not have the opportunity to make their own decision.
Finally, the timing. The source close to the investigation tells CBS News ATF agents found the Davidians were building bombs. at the same time that Koresh was talking about the end of the world. The cult did not appear to have any particular target in mind, but the agents wanted to move sooner rather than later. Now the federal inquiry will determine whether the raid and its timing were justified. Scott Pelley, CBS News, Dallas.
The Waco standoff is part of a long history of cults and violence. As correspondent Bill Lagatuda reports, the fear is this incident could end in more deaths, just like Jim Jones and his followers.
1978, Jonestown. 900 cult members followed their charismatic leader to their deaths. They too thought he was the Messiah. Winona Norwood, who lost her mother and 26 other relatives to Jim Jones, is worried tonight about Texas.
Everybody dies in one day. You'll never forget it. I never forget it. I think about my family every day.
The world never forgot Jonestown, but still, by some estimates, 2,500 cults are thriving in America today. From the well-known Hare Krishna and the Moonies, to groups that come and go, to smaller sects that practice animal sacrifice. The common thread, a leader who talks a good game.
Catching their interest, exciting them, getting them to believe what you're saying. In other words, the standard equipment of a really good con man.
The experts say most who join cults are emotionally confused or distraught, and the promise of a utopian life fills the void. Add in a leader providing for their every need, and rational thought can give way to blind obedience.
Sleep deprivation. My diet was altered so that I wasn't getting the proper nutrients, and all of these things make you very susceptible to following the suggestions of another person.
Another technique, convince members there is an outside enemy, which often explains all the guns.
They're being held hostage, some of them against their will, and some of them are brainwashed to a level of where I'll die for the cause.
The story of Jonestown should have taught the world to beware of messiahs, of how susceptible people can be, and of how easily minds can be controlled. Another hard lesson is in the making tonight. Bill Lagatuda, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, another U.S.
Day, March 4th, I'm Craig Demchek.
And I'm Caroline, too, in Cresson Township. No other vehicles were involved. Neither the name nor the condition of the driver have been released yet. And 2 people were involved in this afternoon crash on Route 22 in Catherine Township, Blair County. Their car hit a telephone pole and a tree. The crash downed utility lines. No word on the names or extent of injuries of the people involved. Craig?
Bombing. Federal agents have arrested a suspect. New York City police apparently leaked the news this afternoon and then proceeded to leak more alleged details. Federal authorities finally confirmed some very limited information, but cautioned that some of the other leaked information may be untrue. There is confusion tonight about the arraignment process. Correspondent Giselle Fernandez begins our coverage of this still developing story.
Tonight, federal agents rushed the man identified as 26-year-old Salame Mohammed away from FBI headquarters after hours of intense interrogation. He has been arrested in connection with the Trade Center bombing that killed 5 people and injured more than 1,000. Investigators say they're looking for more suspects.
We're interested in more than the single individual who has been apprehended, and it's material to the ability of the FBI to do its job, to be able to follow investigative leads and to follow them very quickly. And I don't want to do anything that's going to imperil that operation. It's a remarkable day in the history of the FBI.
Federal agents arrested the suspect without incident at the Jersey City Islamic Center.
Was there an arrest made this morning? Were you here at the time? Yeah.
Late this afternoon, a team of federal agents and the bomb squad searched the suspect's home for any evidence linking him to Friday's blast. Agents also served search warrants at the Jersey City Mosque, where the suspect is reportedly connected with a Muslim fundamentalist group. The group, with headquarters around the world, is called the Muslim Brotherhood, factions of which have been linked to numerous terrorist attacks. The arrest came after an exhaustive 6-day search through the rubble of the bomb site. The big break came when agents from Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms zeroed in on the charred and mangled pieces of a yellow Ford van that had every mark of having carried the lethal explosives. Federal agents traced the van to a Ryder car rental agency in Jersey City, where they say the suspect rented the vehicle in his own name the day before the bombing. After the blast, the suspect reported the van stolen and returned to the lot to retrieve a deposit. He reportedly gave clerks rental papers covered with nitrates, chemicals used in explosives. Because police are still searching for possible suspects in the case, they remain tight-lipped about what is likely to be a lengthy investigation.
We take the circumstance where we find it. We take the evidence that we have, the information we have, and we act upon it. The furthers of the investigation, though we may have had successes along the way, the final product is what we will end up presenting to a United States attorney, who in turn will present it to a grand jury, who in turn will present it to a court and a jury. So we have a long road ahead of us.
The suspect is reportedly still being questioned tonight. We are told he will be arraigned tonight, possibly within the hour. What we do know is this investigation is not over. Again, the FBI is reportedly searching for more suspects. Dan, a lot of confusion still.
FBI spokesman said today that they are in almost constant discussions with Koresh, trying to win the release of more children. That seems to be the objective now. Go slow, avoid bloodshed, get the kids out. Another option is to cut off electricity to the compound to get everyone else out. Security around the perimeter of the compound was very tight today, especially after federal agents discovered an unidentified body on the compound grounds. Bradley fighting machines were brought in to help recover the body today, and I believe they successfully did that. Another thing we're noticing is just more police in the area, a high profile, a lot more police, a lot more weapons. But federal agents are saying they have no delusions. They expect this standoff to last for a while because, as one FBI agent put it, they have plenty of food and water in there, Tom.
Thank you, Jim Cummins, tonight outside of Waco, Texas. It was a very busy day around the country for the FBI. While they were waiting in Waco, they were also moving in to put phony and angioplasty. Why does this heart operation kill more women than men?
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The leader of that Waco cult, the former rock and roller who believes that he's Jesus, now is talking like Saddam Hussein, saying that he's ready for war. And he claims that 90 adults and 17 children still hold up with him for 9 days now. He claims they're ready to die as well. NBC's Jim Cummins tonight on the latest ramblings of David Koresh and what the FBI is doing to respond. Jim, what's the latest there?
Tom, the FBI says David Koresh has indicated he's been planning for this kind of confrontation for 8 years, stockpiling heavy arms and ammunition since 1985. And the authorities are convinced he's eager for a fight.
He has indicated he would be most pleased if we would engage in a gun battle with him. He has made such statements as, "We are ready for war. Let's get it on."
FBI agent Bob Ricks says there is a reason why Koresh wants to have a gun battle.
It's our belief that he believes that his prophecies will be fulfilled if the government engages in an all-out firefight with him in which he is executed.
Rick says even the Bradley fighting vehicles, these light armored personnel carriers that have set up a perimeter around the compound, even these could be in harm's way, according to Koresh.
He has indicated to us that he has sufficient firepower to blow up the Bradley vehicles, and in fact his words were, we can cause those vehicles to go 40 or 50 feet into the air.
So the Army has sent several Abrams tanks, the kind used in Operation Desert Storm, which can withstand almost any kind of conventional firepower, strictly for defensive purposes, the authorities say. The FBI says Koresh and his followers have continued to fortify their position and occasionally take provocative action, like sticking their weapons out of portholes in the buildings.
It does appear that they are preparing even further for
their state of mind.
The people in the compound are thoroughly committed to this endeavor, and they are willing to die for their leader.
Today, the authorities did agree to allow the cult members to conduct a funeral and burial of a person killed in the original shootout. Federal agents raided a business previously owned by Koresh and turned up a small amount of ammunition. And 3 men were stopped at one of the checkpoints near the compound and handcuffed. Another sign of the heightened tension here.
The FBI continues to insist there is a peaceful way to end this standoff, but they say it's up to David Koresh, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. Frank Bowles is one of the country's leading experts on hostage negotiations, the former chief negotiator for the New York City Police Department. He's been following this Waco situation very closely. Mr. Bowles, why do you think Koresh is talking like that at this time? Is he talking to his followers as well as to the FBI?
I think more so to his followers than the FBI, because the FBI is well aware that he has the capability of staying there a long time.
And what about the response of the FBI? Does it talk just as tough in return or take a different tone?
Well, I think they've demonstrated in the past that time is on their side. Time is of the essence, both at Wounded Knee quite a few years ago and also at Idaho just a year or so ago.
Mr. Bowles, this whole business about how long this country can await Mr. Koresh to come out of there, a lot of people are wondering why not some kind of tear gas operation or some Rambo-like operation. Is that at all reasonable?
No, actually, in law enforcement operations, there's no acceptable casualty rate. And so if it takes a little time, or if we have to look a little foolish, I've looked foolish in the past, and I've had people call me all kinds of names, but in the long run, when you bring everybody out alive, that's what counts.
All right, thank you very much. Frank Bowles, the former chief negotiator for the New York City Police Department. In New York, meanwhile, federal authorities continue to look for more suspects in that World Trade Center bombing, and they're concentrating, as you might expect, on associates of Mohammed Salameh, the 25-year-old Palestinian who lived in New Jersey and was arrested when he tried to claim a refund on the van used in the explosion. NBC's Robert Hager is standing by tonight with the latest, including the prospects of more arrest warrants later this week. Is that the case, Bob?
Yes, Tom. Authorities now expect that they will issue some warrants later on in the week, perhaps even arrest warrants. And they're saying that there may be a larger number of people involved in this than they originally thought. Perhaps as many as a dozen, maybe even more. In this second week since the blast, authorities say they're making real progress. As agents inched their way back down into the hole under the Trade Center and resumed searching for clues, New York FBI Director James Fox told us investigators can't be sure whether the bombing involved more than a few people, but
perhaps we're looking for as many as 15 or 20. I think the investigators have a gut feeling. We aren't making any statement in that regard yet, but as I said, the machine is rolling pretty well now, and I think within a few days we'll have a pretty good feel, a pretty good handle on what sort of a conspiracy is involved here.
leads and the identities of some of the suspect Salameh's associates have developed from the seizure of hundreds of pounds of explosive chemicals at a New Jersey storage facility last Friday. And more good leads have developed from informants, as well as a tip hotline.
That phone number, in the course of the 10-day investigation, has produced some very relevant information.
So we're talking live leads here?
We're talking live leads from live informants, yes.
From a converted restaurant that now serves as a ground floor command center at the Twin Towers, Port Authority engineers rush to plan the building's recovery. Bill Goldstein.
We're doing a lot of things at once here in a very compressed time frame.
Trying to get a year's work done in 1 month. Structural engineer Eugene Fasulo.
We probably have, all told, about 2,500 tons of debris to remove.
And remove carefully.
The analogy we've been using in-house is like pickup sticks. You can't, if you pick up the wrong stick, the rest of the pile collapses.
The Port Authority says it'll take 25 days to get to the very bottom of the crater and get all the rubble out. Authorities still aren't certain what the exact role was of the suspect, Salameh. They tend to think that he probably wasn't the most important figure in the plot. Tom?
Thank you, Robert. When Nightly News continues in a moment,
In the streets of America, there are now 50 million handguns. Last year, handgun violence reached an all-time high. Yet as more and more states enact handgun control laws, a CBS News investigation has found that the federal system for regulating gun dealers is out of control. With undercover cameras, we visited what is tantamount to a national arms bazaar. Gun shows, hundreds every weekend, selling thousands of expensive automatics, Saturday night specials, and the favorite of the drug gangs, the MAC-10. These shows have sprung up across the nation since 1986, when federal gun laws were rewritten. That year, Congress made sales at gun shows legal, and at the same time made it very easy for someone to become a federally licensed firearms dealer. All you need is $30 and a record free of felonies. With the federal license, you can buy any number of firearms wholesale and have them mailed directly to your home. The result is a rush on the licenses. More than 250 are issued every day by the ATF, the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Today, there are more than 250,000 license holders, more gun dealers in America now than gas stations. 80% operate from shows or just out of their homes, most never inspected by authorities. The fact is that many of these people could look forward to never seeing an ATF agent their whole lives.
Well, you can do the numbers, and you can see that with 250,000 that the odds are that we won't get to some and don't get to some their entire lives. That's correct.
With odds like those, we found many dealers willing to break the law. The law says a dealer must get the buyer's ID, sell only to someone living in the same state, and make sure the buyer puts his name and address on this federal form, which also asks whether the buyer is a felon or a drug user. In Texas, we told some dealers we were from out of state, making a sale to us clearly illegal.
Can we buy this gun out of state?
Yeah. Normally I'd say no because I'm a licensed dealer.
We told this man only one of us was from out of state.
He's visiting from out of town.
Yeah. Couldn't tell him the gun. Now you could give him the gun.
I could give him the gun?
You could give him. That's between you and him. I don't want to hear about it. Yeah.
That's called a straw man deal, an illegal transaction when someone who can buy a gun fronts for someone who can't. Now, watch this group at a Dallas gun show. They tell the dealer they want all of his MAC-10s. One of them shows a driver's license, while another fills out the form, and a third hands out the cash. The dealer even tells them what answers to put on the federal form. We followed them out of the gun show carrying the guns in plastic cases. They drove to one of the city's most violent housing projects where the money man, who had never shown an ID or signed a form, carries in a gun.
Would you be surprised if I told you that straw man purchases at these gun shows are not only common, they're actually standard?
I wouldn't be surprised at anything that happens at a gun show because I know that with thousands of them that practically anything can happen.
And anything does, like the man who was selling brand new handguns without asking for any ID, no paperwork at all.
I'm not a dealer. No yellow form.
No yellow form?
No yellow form. All I need is $550 cash.
No driver's license, no yellow form. That's easy.
God we trust.
Federal agents estimate that guns purchased at shows are used in as many as 200,000 crimes each year.
Good.
Now, with the number of dealers and shows growing daily, many weapons are disappearing into the streets, undocumented, unregistered, untraceable. In Washington, D.C., Scott Pelley for Eye on America.
And we plan to be following up on that in the weeks to come. Dan Rather for the CBS.
The standoff outside the Branch Davidian compound has become a psychological power struggle between federal agents and cult leader David Koresh.
I cannot characterize him as unstable. We would say that this is certainly unusual.
Sources tell CBS News that through the tense days of waiting, cult members are taunting agents from the compound's gun tower, waving weapons, beckoning them inside, and making obscene gestures.
He has indicated he would be most pleased if we would engage in a gun battle with him. He has made such statements as, "We are ready for war. Let's get it on."
Today, agents searched for weapons and explosives in a Koresh-owned building 4 miles from the compound. They found only a handful of shotgun ammunition. But a local gun dealer who sold semi-automatic weapons to Koresh a few years ago says Koresh must have imported a lot of his heavy firepower.
Coming in through UPS, I understand, or from other dealers, yes, out of possibly the city, out of the county, out of the state.
The FBI is restocking its own arsenal, borrowing Abrams tanks from the Defense Department to replace other armored vehicles brought in last week.
During our discussions with Mr. Koresh, he has indicated to us that he has sufficient firepower to blow up the Bradley vehicles, and in fact his words were, we can cause those vehicles to go 40 or 50 feet into the air.
And the only movement in the negotiations during the last 3 days, cult members have been allowed to bury one of their own, killed in the initial firefight. One cult member indicated overnight by phone she and her 5 children want to leave, but efforts to get them out have failed. 12 other members repeated their allegiance to David Koresh.
From conversations that have been reported to me, the people in the compound are thoroughly committed to this endeavor, and they are willing to die for their leader.
Federal officials say they think it's part of Koresh's philosophy that his prophecies will be fulfilled if he engages in an all-out gunfight with the government and is killed. Now, sources tell CBS News that federal agents don't plan to let this go on indefinitely. Their frustration level is very high, and if negotiations are not more fruitful, they may take action by this weekend. Dan?
Vicki Mabry, live near Waco, Texas. Thanks. A reminder that later in this
snow emergency plan in effect in State College, College Township, Milesburg. Supposed to keep parked cars off the streets. Some drivers just gave up. They couldn't go on and pulled over and abandoned their cars. Now, there are sounds even still of spinning wheels. Some people outside, people talking, trying to get through the snow, clanging. I don't know exactly what's going on. And for the first time today, in 15 years, mail has not gotten through in State College. In terms of utilities, no power outages, water, or phone problems, although cable TV was out a little bit this afternoon. But I should mention that I'm just one person observing the weather here in State College. I don't know what it's like, really, outside of town. Reporting live from State College, I'm Mike Porter. Back to you, Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Mike Porter, reporting from the Center region. Utility crews are bracing for the worst tonight. The storm is bringing high winds with it, creating the possibility or even probability of power outages. Penelec has a plan in place to deal with storm-related emergencies, and we expect to talk with a Penelec spokesman in just a couple of minutes. Let's now go to the list of cancellations created by the storm. We have received scores of calls this afternoon, and you can assume that any event scheduled for tonight or tomorrow is not going to take place. As Mike Porter reported, classes have already been canceled for Monday at Penn State. Also, we have received word classes are canceled at Juniata College in Huntington County and here in suburban Johnstown at UPJ. Also, all District 6 scholastic athletic events at St. Francis and Hollidaysburg, those were to go tonight. Those are all canceled. Many churches have canceled services tonight and tomorrow. In fact, too many for us to list right now. There are a handful, however, that will be conducting services tomorrow. They are Punxsutawney Alliance, and that is the 11 o'clock service only tomorrow morning. St. Charles Church in Twin Rocks, that'll be for the 8:30 and 5 o'clock services tomorrow. St. Andrews in Johnstown, Christ United Methodist, and St. John the Baptist Ukrainian. Again, the best advice for you is to call ahead, but you can safely assume most churches in the region will be quiet tomorrow. There's at least one person we know of who is excited by all of this snow. Douglas Fournier of Grand Rapids, Michigan, is a self-described snow nut who's made it his business for the past 15 years to travel to areas braving the biggest storms. And he thinks this one might just be his career best. Fournier is not a meteorologist, but an advertising representative with a more than casual interest in big snows. He knows meteorologists around the country who tip him off to potential storm action, and he hits the road in his four-wheel drive vehicle, and he is in the Allegheny region tonight, I guess, enjoying this weather. We'll have more on the storm in just a minute. Still to come as well, the weekend movie review, and the local Indian community holds a celebration.
Keystone Country's premier broadcast news organization. This is Action News.
Good evening and welcome to Action News' continuing coverage of the blizzard and its effects on Keystone Country. I'm Lenora Adams. It was a day for folks throughout the region to begin digging out and for authorities to start trying to get an upper hand.
People dead. Feet of snow on the ground. Good evening, everybody. Here in Pennsylvania, at least 15 deaths have been blamed on the storm, and Governor Casey has kept a statewide emergency in effect. Doug Petcash reports now on cleanup efforts in the Johnstown area.
Roads remain treacherous throughout the Allegheny region. Parts of Route 160 north of Johnstown were closed as winds and blowing snow made travel impossible. Route 70 was reported closed, as well as Route 422. These and other major roads are now open, such as Routes 219 and 22. Many just one lane as road crews struggle to keep the blowing snow off, and earth movers clear areas where drifts closed entire intersections. PennDOT had all available equipment out and even rented more to keep ahead of the storm. Penelec crews were on standby most of the weekend, but were sent home as no major power outages were reported. Unilec representatives say their customers are also all online in central Pennsylvania. With the snowfall apparently over, the digging out begins. Mark Miller runs a plowing service, and he's been at it all weekend.
We was doing real good till today, and we equipment started breaking down and that, but we're getting caught up here. It's been rough.
For others, it's been even rougher. While many businesses shut down for the duration of the storm, this mobile station in Richland Township kept its doors open.
We've been dealing with mostly the state truck troopers that come in and penalty that comes in, and then people, you know, been able to get in for the papers and been staying over at the motels.
And those people at the motels include this group, which spent the weekend stranded at the Comfort Inn in Richland. They came from Maryland for a hockey tournament, but couldn't go home.
Would you describe this as roughing it?
No, when you're outside, it's roughing it. Here, it's not bad. Gets a little boring, though. I'd rather be home.
But they and about 100 others stranded there got lucky. The new Red Lobster restaurant that won't even have its grand opening until Wednesday cooked them a free meal.
Nothing close to the area in terms of getting food to people. And so we asked them to run a computer printout of how many guests or how many people that they had staying here. And she told us it was about approximately 120.
While many people are already back on track, for others, the daunting task of digging out lies ahead. Doug Petcash, News Center 6, Johnstown.
As Doug reported, crews
ahead of the county maintenance department
opened the church in a four-wheel drive to rescue the Reverend.
I walked in a wedding gown and boots back to the hotel in the blizzard, and now we've just been stuck here.
I'm Barbara Petito, TV 10 Action News.
While the snow is beginning to settle, some report.
The day after the worst snowstorm we've seen in years, Keystone Country's digging out. But as the wind continues to blow, keeping the snow off the highways is PennDOT's #1 priority.
You're still plowing at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
You're not putting anything down?
No, not yet. We won't start that until tomorrow, probably. Main roads and everything like that will hit today and everything like that, but salt and that won't work right now because it's too cold. The wind chill factor is about 20 below zero.
Hospitals in our area implemented their disaster plans so that they would have the staff and services ready when we need them.
Our security department is bringing people to work and taking them home from work in four-wheel drives. We've called out the National Guard to assist in transporting patients.
We had approximately 100 people who spent the night here last night. The staff from the laundry to radiology and our maintenance crew worked all night long to keep the parking lots clean.
Even the state police needed help today. With their vehicles stuck in the snow, the National Guard was called in to transport and assist the state police in helping stranded motorists.
To assist us, we're having troubles right now getting our patrol vehicles out onto the highway, and they're here to help us get out and search for people.
Just help do whatever we have to do.
And emergency personnel are continuing their efforts to respond as quickly as possible. However, they have confronted some minor problems.
The snow has been terrible. We've been waist deep getting into houses. Had a lot of problems in the rural areas getting off-road into driveways.
So until the wind stops, Keystone Country residents will keep on doing what they've done all day, dig out. Kathy Keefe, TV 10 Action News, Altoona.
Being over onto its side. It happened this afternoon at the Route 220, Route 764 interchange near Duncansville. Luckily, there are no reported injuries from that mishap. In the aftermath of the record snowstorm, our Kelly Goodman speaking with some Altoona residents about how they're dealing with digging out.
While crews are still busy clearing major roadways, Keystone Country residents are doing their best to deal with the snow in their own backyards. And despite the warnings by authorities, many people ventured out to the few businesses that remained open throughout the storm.
They're telling me not to be out, but I'm being very careful.
We've been very busy. We get some slow spots, but then it picks back up and we get really busy.
These Cambria Heights wrestlers and coaches have been stranded in Altoona since the regional tournament Saturday.
So it was really a smart move on everybody's part to stay in town.
For most households, digging out cars is the first priority, even though drifting is expected to continue. But despite the inconveniences, for some, the storm has created a holiday, as schools and businesses remain closed through tomorrow.
It's kind of neat. First time, first storm like this, so it's pretty neat. Having some fun playing in the snow.
Feels like Christmas.
Feels like Christmas? Have you been sled riding yet?
No. We'll probably go tomorrow since school's canceled.
So while many people in Keystone Country merely tolerated the snow, some actually had the chance to enjoy it. Kelly Goodman, TV 10 Action News, Altoona.
Old Man Winter also striking his final blow on several areas outside of this state. Up to 3 feet of snow burying parts of New York State. In Burlington, Vermont, the monster snowstorm paralyzing transportation and wiping power out in some areas. Nationally, at least 96 deaths are blamed on the blizzard. Now back here in Keystone Country, here's a list of major cancellations and closings in Keystone Country. You should note that so far no school district has announced the classes will be held tomorrow. Now due to time constraints, we cannot broadcast every closing, so the best advice is to call your destination ahead of time.